I beg to move let's host no adjournment.
The question is that this House do now adjourn. Manuela Perteghella.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Pension funds hold not just financial value, but moral weight. How we treat our pensioners and how we invest in the future of the hard-working people of this country says everything about the kind of society we are. This evening, I want to bring to the House attention one of the most concerning injustices faced by thousands of former HSBC employees, particularly women, through the use of an outdated punitive policy known as pension clawback. I support the Midland Clawback campaign, which seeks justice for the 51,000 affected members of the Midland Bank pension scheme, now administered by HSBC, who were misled about the nature of their retirement income and are now being short-changed as a result. Unlike most institutions which phased out clawback in the 1980s, HSBC continues to enforce it in its most punitive form. Clawback was originally introduced in 1948 to offset national insurance costs when the state pension was created. And Midland Bank introduced clawback to its pension scheme in 1975 as a cost-saving measure. Former employees were told they would receive defined benefit pension, 2/3 of their final salary in addition to their state pension. Instead, when they reached state pension age, HSBC began deducting a portion of their occupational pension, calling it a state deduction. Yes.
Thank you so much for giving way. I have a constituent who has worked 44 years for Midland Bank and HSBC, was promised a 2/3 final salary pension and is now facing a 16% cut, and that's over £1,700 per annum due to this so-called state deduction. Never told that the scheme was integrated, and even private pension reviews failed to explain this. Does the right honourable member agree that this lack of transparency is just unacceptable and workers like her deserve answers?
Manuela Perteghella.
Absolutely, I fully agree. It's, the term itself is misleading. The money is not being taken by the state. It actually goes back to HSBC. So had it been labelled properly, such as integrated pension deduction, many would have asked questions much earlier. But yes.
Sergeant.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way for securing this debate as well. Sue, a Wokingham constituent of mine, is trying to obtain her full HSBC pension. But because of a clawback deduction that a former employee makes, which has no alignment to the salary she earns, she is losing out on £244 each month. This is obviously unfair and has plunged many pensioners, primarily women, into poverty. Does my honourable friend agree that the Minister needs to seriously consider what support can be provided for people like Sue, who have been left with significant financial difficulties?
Manuela Perteghella.
I thank my honourable friend, absolutely, and I will ask Government and Minister to take action later on. Yes.
The honourable lady for giving way. My constituents Phil and Anne have contacted me about the so-called clawback policy, which would see them lose around £2,000 a year from their pensions when they reach state pension age. They, like many former employees, believe that this is an unfair and morally questionable approach, and does she agree with me that this cannot be the right approach and that they need to reconsider?
Manuela Perteghella.
Yes, and the honourable member make a very good point, absolutely. The lack of transparency allowed this policy to persist under the radar, but the formula used is regressive and unfair. For a start, the deduction is based on the full state pension rate 1 year before retirement, not on salary or actual state pension received. And then it gets divided and then multiplied by years worked. And the result, the longer you worked and the less you earned, the more you lose. And this injustice falls heaviest on women.
Davis.
Thank you very, very much. Former Midland Bank and HSP workers who had a defined pension, benefit pension saw deductions from their pension entitlements at stage pension age, meant to take account of the payment of state pensions. These deductions have no link to salary or pension received, with lower earnings staff members, mostly women, particularly impacted, which includes my constituent, Angela Blockwell. Does the Honourable Member agree that this inequality must finally be recognised and pension clawbacks abolished for all?
Manuela Perteghella.
Yes, I thank the Honourable Member. Absolutely, this practice is a relic of the past and needs to be abolished. Women have historically occupied the lower paid roles at Midland Bank, HSBC. They've taken career breaks to care for children or elderly parents. They've been placed on new contracts with clawback attached, often without being told the implications for their pension rights. HSBC claims there is no discrimination because the policy applies to all, but indirect discrimination is defined as a policy that appears neutral but disproportionately harms a particular group. I will, thank you.
I thank the Honourable Member for giving way. A female constituent of mine in Scarborough and Whitby, who's worked for HSBC UK for over 35 years, has seen their pension reduced by approximately £850 a year due to a clawback clause they were never properly informed about when they joined the bank's defined benefit scheme. Would the Honourable Member agree with me that HSBC really does need to engage properly with the affected employees?
Yes. Manuela Perteghella.
I thank the Honourable Member for her very valuable point. Yes, absolutely. And you know, I have a message for HSBC later on in my debate. So campaigners have presented robust evidence, including research from the University of Exeter, showing the disproportionate impact on women and also low-paid staff. One of the recommendations from the University of Exeter report is for policymakers, us, to consider the suitability of the equal pay provisions which have not been available to members of the post-1974 Midland Bank pension scheme, despite evidence of disproportionate impact upon women. When campaigners turned to the Equality and Human Rights Commission, the Department for Work and Pension, and the Government Equalities Office, they were passed from pillar to post. No one took responsibility, no one acted. Equality law does not cover pension. And let us not forget, HSBC's pension fund currently stands at 4.1 billion in surplus after liabilities. Wow. The estimated cost of ending clawback, just 450 million. HSBC has the resources. What it lacks is the will. Yes, the will.
Amos?
My constituent, my Wellington constituent, Mike, has seen his pension go down in value by 13%, a former Midland Bank employee, because of the failure of HSBC to honour their obligations. He tells me that the state is, in other words, the taxpayer, is going to be making up some of his income as a result. Isn't it totally wrong, given the level of profits that my honourable friend has revealed, that the taxpayer is bearing the burden of an obligation that the corporate giants should be paying themselves?
I thank my honourable friend. Absolutely, it's unfair. It's you know, absolutely, we need to ensure that HSBC is held accountable. In correspondence with MPs, the bank states that because clawback is lawful, therefore it is acceptable. But I say lawful does not mean just. And this Parliament has a duty to act when the law permits injustice. We need to modernise pension legislation to ensure it reflects today's values of fairness, transparency and equality. And, Madam Deputy Speaker, after the WASPI pension injustice, we must be alert to further pension scandals.
Honourable Lady, give way.
Yes, I will.
Madam Deputy Speaker, can I commend the Honourable Lady for Stratford-on-Avon for bringing this forward? The fact that there's so many in the Chamber tonight is an indication of the interest that she has created through her adjournment debate, and well done to her. There were an estimated some 12.95 million state pensioners in Great Britain in 24-25, and the WASPI woman issue, as the Honourable Lady has referred to, they have been hard done by government decisions without consideration. It means that there's an absolute onus on all of us in this House to ensure that pension funds are profitable and sustainable. So does the Honourable Lady not agree that in tandem with enforcing work-based pensions, we must also ensure that state pensions can catch up, and there will still be such a thing as state pensions for the 40-year-olds today that are paying their national insurance and believing that state pension will be there for them whenever it comes their time?
Perteghella.
I thank the honourable member for raising these important issues. Absolutely, we need to make sure governments need to be have a long-term outlook to ensure that the hard-working people, the hard-working British people of today will be able to retire on a comfortable pension. And we urgently need also a full review of pension clawback practices. But also let me tell you that I had many constituents writing to me about other pension unfair schemes, former police officers, and also people on occupational pensions, which are not protected from inflation. And
on that point,
yes.
with the Honourable Member give way.
Dr. Al Pinkerton.
I'm very grateful to the Honourable Member for giving way and congratulate her for securing this debate. Terry, one of my constituents, worked for a large American multinational company, and as a consequence of the 1995 Pensions Act, he's found his pre-1997 pension contributions decoupled from inflation. And because of the nature of inflation, his savings that he depends on now for his life have been gradually eaten away, and he finds himself in increasing levels of destitution. I'm again grateful to the Honourable Member for calling this debate, and can I ask the Minister to look at this issue with the seriousness that it requires? It cannot be right that pensioners in our country are suffering as a consequence of decisions made by multinational companies who remain hugely profitable. And Madam Deputy Speaker, this is an issue with a particular geography because so many multinational companies were located in the southeast of England. Thank you.
Manuela Perteghella.
I thank my honourable friend for bringing this important point. We do need legal reform to ensure that pensions and payments are finally brought under the protection of equality law, but also we need greater transparency and accountability from pension providers, especially those entrusted with the retirement futures of hard-working people. Because HSBC clawback policy is discriminatory in its impact, is misleading in its language, and fundamentally unjust in its effect. I therefore urge the Minister to bring forward legislation to put an end to this outdated practice and to finally stand up for those whose voices have gone unheard for far too long. Madam Deputy Speaker, clawback is just one part of a broken pension system. We must also ask, where are our pension funds invested? What future are we buying with that money?
Would my honourable friend give way on that point? I'm very grateful.
Lisa Smart.
I'm very grateful, Madam Deputy Speaker, to my honourable friend for laying out the case for change as she's doing so well. And she talks about the investments that pension funds are invested in. I worked for over a decade in the investment industry, and many of my clients were big public pension funds, and more recently I served as a trustee of one of the largest public pension funds in the country. And one of the things that pensioners got in touch with me about particularly was where their money was going. Was it being used to fund fossil fuel extraction? Was it being used to support some quite unsavoury regimes around the world? Does my honourable friend agree with me that pensioners should have more power to have a say over what goes on with their money?
Manuela Perteghella.
Thank you. I fully agree. I think it's really important, that pensions also reflect ethics, morality, and the pensioners or people that invest in these pensions have a voice. So it's no longer good enough to see pensions in isolation from sustainability, ethics and morality. Whether it is the way funds are clawed back from low-paid pensioners or the way that they are funneled into destructive high-emission industries, the system is crying out for reform. And as we look ahead to COP30, billions of pounds of local government pension schemes are still invested in fossil fuels and in industries that drive deforestation, biodiversity loss, and wildlife extinction. So in conclusion, Madam Deputy Speaker, if we are to build a just and sustainable future, then we must build a just and sustainable pension system, one that protects not only people in retirement, but the planet and generations to come. Thank you.
Sir Torsten Bell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Everyone deserves a secure retirement. For many, their occupational pension is an essential part of that. Having spent years paying into a pension scheme, it matters to all of us that they get a decent pension out. Decent in the sense of being adequate to their needs, and decent in terms of providing the benefits they were promised. So I'm pleased that the member for Stratford-upon-Avon has secured this debate and spoken so well during it on a topic deeply relevant to all of our constituents. We are all, after all, either pensioners or planning on becoming pensioners at some point. And I'd like to begin by thanking her and everyone who has spoken during her speech. We've talked about a wide range of issues relevant to different pension schemes and different pensioners, and I'm not going to comment in great detail about specific pension schemes, though I am sure that specific employers will have heard the points and the references made by all honourable members this evening. But I do want to respond in more general terms to the points that she and others have raised, because the member for Stratford-upon-Avon raised the issue of integrated pension schemes, sometimes called clawback schemes, and I appreciate that this type of scheme can be controversial thanks to the change in the private pension income involved, and all of us sympathise with anyone who expected to a straightforward income increase when their state pension kicked in, only to find things were much more complicated than that. And I've read and listened to representations on this issue myself. As with all defined benefit schemes, integrated schemes are required to pay out the full value of the promised pensions to each member as set out in their scheme rules. That provides certainty, security and a base on which savers can build their retirement plans. Now, integrating an occupational pension scheme with the state pension was a core design of some schemes, and that has pros and cons. It used to be a common feature of final salary schemes, covering almost half of schemes, according to one early 2000 survey, although it is far less common today, partly for some of the reasons that the Honourable Lady has set out. The original aim was to provide a smooth level of pension income throughout retirement, which started before the state pension age was reached, with a higher amount of occupational pension paid before state pension age, followed by a reduction in the occupational pension when the member receives their state pension. The amount of the reduction is required to be set out in the pension scheme rules, and is therefore very important that the rules were clearly communicated to those involved, as my honourable friend from Doncaster East has made clear. Because while the aims of integrated pensions are clear, it would be, of course, be a big shock to anyone to see their occupational pension reduced upon receiving the state pension if they hadn't expected it. Hence the importance of employees understanding the pension benefits they can get from their scheme. And the government places great weight on the importance of this clear communication, because without it, no one can plan properly for the future. All schemes are required by law to provide every member with basic information about the scheme, either before they join or very shortly afterwards. And that includes an explanation of the contributions, in the case of some of the schemes mentioned today, which were on the employer side only, but also how benefits were calculated, exactly the integrated and clawback mechanisms we are talking about this evening. If savers have not received clear communication in this form that's required by law, then they must have avenues of redress. They can bring a complaint to their scheme's internal dispute procedure, but if that doesn't resolve the issue, the Pension Ombudsman is there to act. Now, I note some calls tonight for government to compel the withdrawal of integration arrangements. Those have been common from some time, and I've heard them. And I recognise some of the arguments being made, but I owe it to this House to be clear that we cannot retrospectively change the benefit schemes offered to their members. Any legislative change would affect all integrative schemes, risking the future of some that are less well funded. But I do want to engage with the question of pension fairness so many members across the House have raised this evening, because while the law is very clear that men and women must be treated equally within any scheme, I understand the points that are raised about the effects of those scheme rules that are felt very unequally indeed. Now, the inequality of pensions more broadly is a very big issue for our society, particularly for women and for lower earners over the years. And I want to celebrate some progress that has been made, but also recognise how much more there is to do. For progress, the state pension, the new state pension introduced after 2016 by the previous government, has made a significant difference in closing the gap between the average amounts received weekly by men and women, to equalise it in practice. And the honourable member for Stratford raised the importance of the state pension as the bedrock of all of our pension savings. So that is progress that has been made. And on automatic enrolment, we've also seen significant progress, with 89% of eligible women who are now saving into a pension. That's a big change from the 2000s, when as little as 40% of women in some were saving into a pension pot. But there is much more to do. The gender pension gap, which the Department for Work and Pensions now publishes figures on for the first time, is very large. Indeed, some of that reflects some of the historical issues we've been discussing, but it also reflects our labour market. Lower employment rates for women, much more likely to work in part-time work, much more likely to be lower earners. For example, women, 3.9% of women work in low-paid work versus 2.8% of men. These are the structural inequalities that lie behind things that then manifest as pension inequality. And that's one of the reasons why it's so important the reform of the state pension has moved towards a more equal treatment of women and men. In terms of what the government is doing about that, we will shortly be setting out a timeline for phase 2 of our pension review, focusing on adequacy and in particular addressing some of these very important questions. Because although people talk about pension adequacy on average across the whole population, it is very different for different groups, and that's exactly why the pensions review will need to rest on the questions raised. But I'd also like to say it also shows the importance of some of the changes being brought through in the labour market by this government, including the Employment Rights Bill, which will disproportionately benefit women who are more often lower earners. Now, turning to the question raised on indexation, some schemes do provide indexation above the legal minimum on a discretionary basis, and I, like the Honourable Member for Surrey Heath, sympathise with those members who had understood that they would receive ongoing discretionary increases only to be let down. We take their concerns seriously. I've met with several groups of MPs on exactly this issue, and I've asked the Department to work with the pension regulator to understand why schemes are not making discretionary payments and to monitor trends. Both trustees and employers need to think carefully about the effect of inflation on members' benefits. That is especially true on the back of the exceptional inflation of recent years. Pension scheme trustees, after all, have a fiduciary duty to scheme members, a duty they should apply when considering discretionary increases. This is directly relevant to recently announced reforms on the use of surpluses in defined benefit schemes that several members have raised tonight. These will make it easier for individual schemes to make decisions that improve outcomes for sponsoring employers and members. And this could include discretionary benefit increases where trustees can consider the situation of those members who would benefit from such rises and whether the scheme has a history of making such payments in the past. Trustees will, in negotiation with the employer, be responsible for determining how members may benefit from any release of surplus. Now, I would like to thank members who have contributed this evening, and particularly the Honourable Member for Stratford-upon-Avon. We all benefit from the opportunity to address this important topic, and as the Minister for Pensions, it is my priority to ensure people who work hard can enjoy the retirement they are owed. And that is what this government will always do, but I will give way for one last time.
I'm grateful. The Honourable Member for Hazel Grove asked the question about whether pensioners might be given more control over where their pension funds are invested, and this is also an issue that's arisen recently around whether pension funds can be invested in defence companies in the UK. I wonder if the Minister could comment on this.
Minister Bell.
I thank the Honourable Member for his intervention and his reminder to respond on that point. He will know that trustees already do have a responsibility to invest in the interest of their members, and that the law requires trustees of schemes that are significant, with over 100 members, to set out a clear statement of their investment principles, and the Honourable Lady mentioned some of the issues they'll want to consider in that, and that is how they provide clarity to their savers that that's the case. There is also then scope for individuals, particularly in larger pension schemes on the defined contribution side, to make choices about where they invest their funds. You see that, for example, in Nest, the government-backed pension scheme, where we do see individuals making different choices, sometimes on the grounds of the issue he raises on defence, but also on other ethical issues across the board. But I thank the Honourable Member for his intervention and for reminding me to come back on that point before concluding, which was just to say that it is important that we do offer people secure retirements. That is the job of this government. It's my job as the Pensions Minister. It's what our Pensions Review is focusing on doing, and it's what this government will always do. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
The question is that this House do now adjourn. As many as are that opinion say aye. Aye. The ayes have it. Order, order.